Hello everybody, welcome to the History and Awesome podcast. We're back again. We haven't done one in a long time. This is episode 18. We're back again with Ben. We have a new member, Daniel, who's going to join us. Daniel, you are the third, you're the third other person to appear on this podcast. So that's an honor in itself.
I feel very special.
Yeah, don't get used to it. So we've had a lot of new people on the channel who've subscribed. So I think for this podcast, not only are we doing video, so you can see Ben's face and my face, Daniel's camera shy. No, I'm kidding. His videos are insane. We are gonna kind of introduce ourselves in a little bit of sense because we haven't done that in a long time. Introduce who we are and also introduce the what this channel is going to be about. So I guess I'll go first. So you guys have seen me on the channel. My name's Eric. I study history, and my I guess my research focus is modern European history, like specifically like warfare. I liked like early 19th century warfare. That's kind of like my thing. But anything within that realm, I enjoy a lot, as you guys can see on the things I cover on the channel. And yeah, I created this channel a couple I think last year, and I'll kind of give a little more idea what this channel is supposed to be. But yeah, that's kind of my thing. Ben, throw it over to you. What do you do? What's your thing?
So I'm still at university, and I'm a genetics and genomics major. I specialize in human genetics. That's about it.
Yeah, and he's on here. You might think, why is a science guy on here? Because he likes history, so that's why he's on this thing. And yeah, of course, I went to UC Davis as well. We both went to the same school, as you guys would have seen in the earlier vlogs we did. He was in there for a little bit. And next person is Daniel. Daniel, what's your thing?
My thing is American history as well as politics. As well as a fascination with ancient history as well as warfare. I do a dabbling of everything. Unfortunately, I'm still in university, so I don't have a real research done under my belt yet.
Okay. And then we'll kind of get into more of the things like the dabble in probably later in the podcast or in the other podcasts. Yeah, so I guess the next thing we can talk about is what this channel's supposed to be about. So if you guys have seen the trailer, you guys kind of get an idea of what the channel's supposed to be about. But I guess what I'm trying to do with this channel is kind of pair the things that we learned in university. And I feel like there's a lot of interesting things that we learned in there. And I think the professors there teach it in a very nice way. There's also just literature that we also read as well, and just the way we kind of look at different things in the world and the way we kind of our minds work, and kind of bring that into a platform to a wide audience, and kind of introduce you guys to some cool things, and hopefully you guys will like it and it'll be entertaining. And yeah, that's kind of what we do on History Made Awesome. And then as we kind of go through with the channel, you guys will definitely see that come together. But yeah, so I guess we can kind of go into what's happened since the last podcast for me and Ben, and of course Daniel will kind of relay some things that's happened to him in the last year, as it just turned 2019 about a couple days ago. And so who would like to go first? Anybody? Or should I go?
Why don't you lead?
Okay, I'll lead. Wow, so 2018 was a pretty big year. So I kind of took a lot of time off because I was doing research, and I'll probably I did a little video of it before to kind of give you an idea of what it was, but I think I might do a more in-depth video in that regard. But so I took a little bit of time off in the channel to do research, and that was super awesome. I was able to get all the things I wanted to accomplish in 2018, but I still learned a lot of cool stuff. In terms of academically, how to do research, how to be a better writer. Pushing through the end to get things done, how to time manage better. And then I also was preparing to apply for grad school, so that was a very fun experience. If I was to relay some knowledge on that, I would say try to get things done as early as possible. For me, it was a little bit difficult because I didn't really know what I wanted to research on. I was like, I don't know if I want to do political science or I didn't know what history thing to research. So after some time off in the summer, that's how I was able to kind of discover what I wanted to research. I think I might go into that in a later video because I think that's some interesting things. So I'll definitely go on that in a later video. And then went to Europe, so that was super fun. What happened in Europe that was fun? A lot of you, if you guys have seen the European vlogs, you guys kind of got a little glimpse of that. I'll try to get another of those vlogs done during this year because I'm on my actual gap year. So I'll definitely get a lot more stuff done. This channel will be a lot more active. What happened? I guess I don't think I'll put this in the video, but this will probably be the next video. But I probably will put it in. It's probably like behind the scenes thing. What I found is that there's only so much things you can vlog in a historical space because we actually went to a lot of museums and they were not very cool with that. Like I can kind of understand. I guess I got in trouble like 3 times for doing it. The first time it was in what is that church? The famous church in England? It's the
St. Paul Cathedral?
No.
That's in New York.
No, that's in England. It's Westminster Abbey. There we go.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. So what happened was that there's when you go into it, there's a huge ass line. There's something in the video that you guys will see, so I won't spoil it. But there's a huge ass line. It took like maybe an hour to get in to. And so they had this little church to the side. And I was like, I'm gonna go in there and maybe film a little bit to kind of test the waters because they said on there like no filming or whatever. But I'm just like, let's just see if I can get away with it. So I started like just filming a little bit and like, oh, this is super cool. No one's gonna tell me anything. And then this one dude was like, hey, no filming in here. And I'm like, oh my god, okay. So I stopped filming. He's like, look with your eyes. I'm like, okay. So I'm like, I'm not gonna do this when it gets because if they're making a big fuss in the small church, when they get Westminster Abbey, they're gonna make a huge ass fuss. So I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna film. So if you guys are watching the video, that's the reason why there's no footage of that. Sadly, I might go back when I get this channel a bit bigger. I might do like a little tour of it. Who knows for the future. And then I got in trouble at the Imperial War Museum for filming, which was a little bit weird because they didn't say anything. But I filmed pretty much into the main atrium that they have. But when I got more into like the actual exhibits, like they said I could take pictures, but I couldn't film, which was like kind of weird for me because like basically filming is like taking photos. Never mind. I won't go into it. So that's what kind of happened on my European trip. Everything else is super awesome. So you guys will definitely get to see that in the vlogs. Hopefully you guys enjoyed them. But except for that, getting ready for grad school and all the problems associated with that. And yeah, that was pretty much my 2018 in a small little segment. Ben, how about you? Yeah, I heard you did some interesting things over the year.
Yeah, actually, I had a lot of similar things to you. Actually, toward the beginning of the year, I started doing my research at the Genomic Center at UC Davis, and then over the summer, I went to Thailand and Japan to study microbiology and just general biological research. And then I started at a research clinic called the Mind Institute over just in Sacramento over here. And and then the past few months I've been doing grad school applications and all the fun that is associated with that.
Oh my god, Daniel!
How did the GRE end up going for you?
Okay, here's my thing. Okay, so I prepared as much as I can. I just found that like some of the tools they were giving me to like work with, like totally did not work, or at least I didn't get enough time for them to kind of sit along. Because one of the things they tell you is to like I didn't even care about the math part because when I talked to my professors, like, oh, they don't care about math. So I'm like, I'm just gonna like
skip those sections.
I just kind of like A, which sucks because I actually studied for like 2 months for the math section too, and so I'm all like, fuck, I just wasted a whole bunch of time for this stuff. And so I had on my gap here, so I had plenty of time. So like the one thing I'll say is that like when they tell you to kind of, I don't know, the strategies did not work for me at all. So I got a pretty decent score on my not the analytical, it's the word, like the vocabulary based ones.
Yeah, those ones.
Yeah, not the math part, but the other part, reading comprehension and that type of stuff.
The quantitative reasoning.
Yeah. So I did pretty well. I got like I'm not gonna tell my score, but I did pretty decently.
Were you above or below the 20th percentile?
I got like a 146. 46. So it wasn't too
Okay.
terrible. But then
Not bad.
on my writing part, I got it.
Oof.
Ooh.
So here's my thing, though. Here's my thing, okay? Like I knew it was coming up because I remember talking to you, Ben. You didn't kind of know how the test is going to be situated, so you kind of got surprised by the writing part, right? Is that true?
Yeah, I didn't realize that the writing is always at the beginning. I was hoping it would be in the middle.
Yeah. So I kind of knew how the test was going because I've done a bunch of practice tests. But like when you actually sit down to write, it's actually really difficult to like write in that short amount of time, because it's like you gotta like get your first thing and then write as fast as you can. And so like I thought I actually did pretty good in the writing. Like I actually like on the other ones I'm like what do I like on the other ones I'm like okay, what do I write? What do I write? What do I write? But when I got there, I was like in 2 minutes I already had my subject and everything, and I just started going. And I think if I would have had maybe 8 more minutes, I think I could have probably did a little bit better, I think. But yeah, so that was interesting experience. So hopefully I don't have to do that again. But yeah, so that was me. So Ben, so you kind of covered. So you do your GREs. Anything else beyond that, or?
Just a lot of personal statement stuff. I actually turned in all my applications to the 3 schools that I'm applying to, and one of them emailed me back and said that I didn't submit a lot of stuff I was supposed to.
Oh snap!
Turns out that the instructions that they had on the page where you actually submit the personal statements, the instructions that they have there aren't the actual instructions.
What?
You have to click on a link to get to the actual instructions, where it's a 4-part personal statement, and I only wrote 1 part. So I was given like 10 days to fix it.
Okay.
Because I submitted it on the 14th, and I got an email the next day saying you need to resubmit it by the 24th.
Okay.
So the first big chunk of winter break was just writing personal statement stuff, and
Okay.
kind of annoying, but it was I got it all in.
That's good. That's good.
That's good.
So yeah, that was. So I guess we'll talk more about that in another video. I think there's some cool little insight we can kind of give into that. But yeah, that's cool. And Daniel, what about you? How was your 2018?
Felt very much similar to how a chicken must feel after its head's been chopped off and it runs around in a circle for a few moments. It was the end of my first year as a Davis student and the beginning of my last year as a Davis student.
Okay.
Applied for grad schools. I did the GRE. Did better than I expected I would, which is good.
That's good.
I'm waiting to hear back from schools and taking a very busy course load to finish the double major in political science.
Oh, okay. Okay, and are you doing history or political science as your major, as your for graduate school?
I've applied for both, and I'm going to see what happens.
Okay.
Interesting. Do you know what you want to do with the majors?
No, I don't.
Fair enough.
Flying by the seat of my pants. We'll see how it goes.
Brilliant.
Make it up as you go.
Brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we kind of covered the first part of it. Anything else you guys want to add to that? Anything else? You guys ready to move on?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so if you guys haven't seen these podcasts before, one of the things we'd like to do is kind of we like to react to certain political topics or current events that are kind of going on, and then also we have some interesting articles that we found, and we also be reacting to those. And we've had a lot of time to kind of look over these articles, especially myself. So hopefully we found some pretty good ones that you guys like. Do you guys want to start with any of these? I guess we can start with current events. We can start with current events, I guess. I guess.
So the volcano one? It's pretty current.
About 700 years ago. Let's start with current events. I guess the one thing I would like to start off is, as of the 5th of January, the U.S. is still going through a government shutdown, and supposedly the reason why is because Trump wants this wall because he believes that's the best way to protect the U.S.'s interests, or like its state, or whatever you call it. But that is one interesting topic that is going on. And since Daniel, you are a political science major, I think you should kind of go first and kind of your thoughts on the entire situation.
Sure. So, beginning of Trump's nonsense about the wall is that he was willing to compromise, I think, 2 days before the shutdown, or 3, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
And then Ann Coulter and Rush Limbaugh went on their shows and basically browbeat him into returning to his previous position of no compromise. And he's been there since, even though he does not have the votes, even amongst Republican senators, to get it passed, which is why it has not moved to the Senate as of yet.
Yes.
You want something more specific, or is that good enough?
I guess that's kind of good. It kind of gives us a kind of a lean into the topic, what's going on. I guess we can kind of give what's our thoughts on it. I don't know if you want to go first on that. I think since Dan, you've kind of started it, I think kind of give your thoughts on the entire situation.
Sure. So he's trying to rationalize that Mexico has paid for the wall via the trade deals and the new NAFTA nonsense that's the same as the old NAFTA nonsense. Mm-hmm. As you probably gathered, I think it's nonsense. He's merely trying to posture and look good for his base, which is all he's ever tried to do. But he's losing the little support he had amongst the Republican establishment in the process.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then just on the effectiveness of the wall, we've kind of talked about on the podcast this idea of immigration, something that I find not, I would say, kind of personal in a sense. The first off is this idea of a wall actually helping the immigration problem in the United States is just simply ridiculous, though. Like, first off, I guess let's try to break this down as much as we can. So, I guess the first thing is, why are there lots of people leaving Latin American countries for the United States? And then how to actually help the situation. And in my opinion, I don't think the wall is the best way to do this. I think if you really want to help out the immigration crisis, especially that's going on between the United States and Central and Latin American countries in South America, I think you kind of have to actually help the problems that are going on there. And a lot of these people are actually just fleeing, crime and poverty, and they're not bringing the crime and poverty. They're trying to get away from it. So I don't see how they're adding to the situation. And so I think one of the best ways you start to do is maybe what's the best way the U.S. can actually help those Latin American countries to maybe economically develop them a lot more. That'd be the first way to look at it. And I think that the wall is just it doesn't really help the situation at all. If anything, it's just gonna, there's nothing that's gonna stop these people from leaving their nation, their countries, and coming to the United States. Like, an entire desert won't stop them. All the different trials and tribulations that these people have to go through just to get to the border is not going to stop these people. So I think that's just one of the first things that we should kind of look at as a nation, is what are some of the best ways that we can do it. And then the one thing I kind of thought was interesting, and then you guys can kind of talk on my points or anything else you guys want to add on this, but supposedly there's a movement that's going on to kind of fund the wall through other means. The one thing I want to talk about is there was a GoFundMe account made by a former veteran. His name was trying to find the name, Brian Koflag, I believe his name is. He was I think he was a several-time amputee from the war in Afghanistan. He served in the part of the Air Force, and he's right now, I believe he's at
just under 20 million.
Just under 20 million.
Yeah.
And this is like my thing, and I've heard his topics on a thing, and he believes that these people are bringing in drugs, crime, and all these different things like that. And I think that's just a totally different situation beyond that. But my problem with that is that for him in particular, he could use that money to help pay for Veterans Affairs and a bunch of other causes that definitely could use that money in a very, very better way, or much more efficient way. And so that's kind of my thing on it. I don't know if you guys have any other thoughts on that or anything I said.
Yeah, pretty similar thought to what you're saying, is that that money could be spent on so many other things. And I've seen some people try to justify it where it's like, $6 billion isn't that much money compared to the rest of the budget. It's like, you're right. That's why we keep saying we should use that money for other things that are actually important, that will actually fix something, instead of just this nonsense with the wall where it's completely pointless. It's not going to change anything.
I agree. Daniel, how about you, my man? Anything that we've said, anything you want to speak on?
No arguments about the wall being pointless, just some specific numbers. 51% of illegal immigrants to the United States come by plane, so the wall won't do anything there. I think over half of the remaining immigrants come by water, so again, the wall won't do anything there. And I think many come from Canada, actually, but I cannot comment on the specific numbers there.
And then where's this source coming from? Where people can look at it?
This was, it was on Adam Ruins Everything. It was on one of his sites, sources. Fantastic work. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And then
he did a sick.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say that just keep going, but just send me that source when you're done, so I can post it on the. All the articles we're looking at will be in the description, so you guys can check it out. But you just send me that article when you get a chance, and I'll post that.
Yeah, no problem.
On the thing.
Go ahead.
No, go. Just continue.
So the wall is garbage, and for reasons we've already stated, his money could go to so many other better things, especially because the 20 billion was it that he originally wanted for the wall, 24 billion, something like that, which now it's reduced to 5 billion, nothing. And if he really wanted the funding for the wall, he could easily take it from the grotesque increase to the defense contractors that they've gotten from. I believe it's $756 billion, if I'm not mistaken. Their current funding for the defense department, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Let me look that up real quick.
And then also, as Daniel's looking that up, and you can stop me when it's done.
$681.1 billion is the current defense budget.
Jesus.
A 15% increase from the previous year, which was a 15% increase from the previous year. Oh, that's disgusting. Yeah. So they could take any number of $1 billion from there to build their wall if they really wanted it built.
Again, but that's politics, though, because they believe that if you're not spending money on defense, then you're leaving the country vulnerable to attacks. Even though we spend way more than any other nation in the world by a huge margin.
Mm-hmm.
And then also on that degree, I kind of want to touch on the problems that these Latin American countries are facing. Now, I will say that this topic is something that cannot be covered in 10 minutes or 5 minutes at that. But the one thing I will say is that there's a good book. It's by Duel. It's called what is it called? Something Aiding Migration. I'll put it in the description. It's Aiding Migration. There we go. And basically, what the book looks at is how the U.S. and its kind of international system and other like the World Bank and other these things, how actually they kind of hurt these nations that are a part of these funds who get money from the U.S. for development funds, things like that. And a lot of these problems come from the U.S. putting barriers on these people to not allow them to be competitive with U.S. markets. And it's a great book. You guys should definitely check it out. I'll put it in the description, Duel, Aiding Migration. But if you guys kind of look at that, you can kind of see how the U.S. kind of makes these problems for themselves because they want to make their own businesses profit than the people that are there. Make them work for low wages and different things of that nature. So I think that's one problem that we can look at to maybe help the situation at all. But again, it's one of those things where it's you might do that, but you're also hurting U.S. business interests as well. So it's and also what with Daniel was saying is you can get that money if you really want to from the defense. But again, it's that idea of politics. If you really want to do what you want to do, then you have to really cut through those types of politics. Anything else you guys want to add to that thing? I kind of said my piece.
Sure. In the 50s and 60s in particular, the United States did quite a bit of what you were discussing in that book, where they would get involved in their business, their supposedly private business, specifically with United Fruit. It was an American fruit company that had business in Nicaragua, Honduras, Guatemala, a couple other nations. And the Secretary of State and the head of the CIA were the Dulles brothers. Mm-hmm. They were former lawyers who worked for United Fruit. And when there was talks of possibly buying back the land from United Fruit, rather than have their their profits lowered. They convinced the Dulles brothers that they were, in fact, these politicians who were trying to buy the land back were communists, and decided they should go in there and overthrow the democratically elected governments, therefore leading to the political turmoil that has led to continuous upheavals in the regions since then.
Yeah, and then also on that point, I mean, if you look at the Cold War in general, like how much the U.S. spent in like building up these governments just to take on, communism, and then all the civil wars and all the different things that came from those very violent events, especially like in Nicaragua, for example. I went there. I talked about the podcast, but I'm not to what length I did. But I went to Nicaragua in December of, like January of last year, like December, January last year. And one of the things that was interesting was that, of course, with Nicaragua, they had the large civil war, especially not just in like the 80s and 90s, early 80s and 90s, but like even before then. And what you guys know the Iran-Contra affair, right?
Of course.
Yeah, so the Contras, of course, were in Nicaragua, and they're fighting government forces there. And interesting enough, there's two stories I'll tell from this. One of them is that the person who was my dad's cousin or something like that, he was actually like driving us all around Nicaragua and showing us the places, things like that. He had actually served not against the Contras, but against the government that then took over they then took out the Contras. So they essentially toppled the first government first. I forget the names. If someone wants to look up that for me, that'd be cool. But they took out the first government, and he was involved in that event. And then what happened is that the U.S. believed that government was corrupted by by the Russians and communism, for example, and that's when they brought in the Contras. Interesting enough, like the Contras, if you kind of look at Nicaragua, there's a certain part of it, kind of like where the mountainous area is, but they were very like active in that area, and that's where my family's from. And so what happened one time was my dad's cousins, he used to work for the like the telephone company, essentially the government, pretty much, because they had to put up all the power lines, things like that. What happened is that his little group, they were like driving the government van, and they were ambushed by a group of Contras, and so like literally like they killed pretty much everybody who was with him, except they did not kill him because he was connected with my family, and I guess that family had a lot of influence in there, so they didn't want to like piss off our family, so they actually let him go. So like just like take that and then multiply that pretty much everywhere within Latin America, and just you can kind of see why they're going through all the problems that they do. It's like you don't just like go through that type of problem and then just become normal again, especially without the aid necessary. I mean, if you look at in Europe, for example, after the Second World War, all the money that the U.S. spent into Western Europe to redevelop it, I mean, it takes that much money to redevelop a nation after that. So I guess that's all I'll kind of speak on that. And before we move on, the book is called Aiding Migration, The Impact of International and Development Assistance on Haiti. And that's by, doesn't give me an author. Josh DeWind, that's his name. So I'll put that in the description. So I guess we kind of hit
fighting the Socialist Sandinista Junta of National Reconstruction in Junta, Nicaragua, according to
Wikipedia.
According to Wikipedia, that's reliable.
But yeah, to be fair, I don't really know Nicaraguan history, even though I should. It's a lot of things happened in that time. But I think we kind of talked a lot in that regard. What do you guys think? You guys want to go on to the next one?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, so this is the last political one, and then we have one that I think Ben will definitely enjoy after this one. But recently, the new House came in, and I can say that my congressional leader got voted in, so that's coolio. Let's see if I can find it. I'm not giving
it was the one about Rashida Tlaib?
Yes. And if you guys have it open, definitely let us know what happened in that event. I think a lot of you guys heard, but let the people know.
Sure. She said, quote, "We're going to impeach the motherfucker," in reference to Donald Trump.
And then at the same time, her fellow Democrats were speaking that they believe that that it might take on, like, this kind of rhetoric might actually make things worse than make things better, by having that type of dialogue. I guess, Ben, what's your kind of opinion on that? What do you think? To make things better? Is it good? Is it funny?
Well, I don't know. Republicans for the longest time have had no class, no civility, no anything of the sort. They'll call people terrorists. I don't know, Nazis, fucking anything they feel like calling anyone on any given day. Anytime anyone says anything about them, though, they hide and cry and whine. Mm-hmm. And this is just another example of that. And based on the reaction that the other Democrats had, it's clear that the Democrats, at least at the older party members, the ones who are kind of, at the top, mm-hmm. still want to try to stick to civility and still want to be gentle.
Yeah, I got you.
Where it maybe is time to stop doing that.
I find it like funny, but I also kind of think that I kind of agree with people that, like, do you really, like, I find it funny, but also at the same time, it's like, I'm always that type of just as me personally, like, I wouldn't, like, act like that. And so in my mind, like, if the people act like that because they're not intelligent enough to come up with a crafty answer or an answer that can actually be useful. And also, you're kind of playing to that game where, like, your only goal is to impeach the president instead of making the nation better. So in that regard, you're kind of taking people, like, in the wrong idea, and kind of this idea of also, like, we have this person, you're gonna have to make the best of what you can, and then if he has to be impeached based on the law, then you do it. That's just my personal view on it.
I would agree if this was in the middle of a debate or something, but this was just at a party mm-hmm. where she just kind of said something. If this was in the middle of a debate and they were like, okay, now your term, and that was the only thing she said, yeah. Then I would agree. But I wouldn't say that saying this casually at a party surrounded by people where you're just kind of being friendly, mm-hmm. this is just normal. That's just how you talk with normal people.
I got you. Daniel, what's your take on this thing?
So I don't really care what language she uses. She can say whatever she wants. I don't care what language Trump uses. He can say what he wants, so long as it is not counterproductive to whatever meeting they're going to. So, for example, if Trump were to say something stupid, pick a random anecdote, his comment about African countries.
Yeah.
That is not helpful. If he's talking about an individual person or whatever, that's fine. That's who cares?
I got you.
It's the language itself is irrelevant. It's a matter that the old guard Democrats find it repulsive due to the fact that they're old guard Democrats and they're trying to cling to this idealistic nonsense that hasn't existed since the 60s, at the very least in the Republican Party. And it's very overblown, and yes, the Republicans are using it to their advantage, knowing full well that Trump does say all these things and worse.
Yeah.
The Young Turks put a beautiful compilation together of all the many times that Trump swore and said worse things than him, and it's 3 minutes long of just the swearing.
Jesus.
And it's not even all of it. It's just like what they could find in a couple moments.
Yeah, so I guess I'll give you a couple of reactions from the people that have said things. Let's look after some of these things. One person, Jim Costa, Democrat of California, inappropriate added, he said, as elected officials, I think we should expect to set a higher bar. It's not helpful. Another person says Mueller hasn't. This is Republican Ron Kinn, Democrat from Wisconsin. Mueller hasn't even produced this report yet, and that people should cool their jets a little bit, let the prosecutors do their job, and finish the investigation. I think, what's her face? Pelosi said that while she didn't agree with the language, she also didn't think anyone should make a big deal of it about the expletive, noting the president is also known for having a foul mouth sometimes. And she goes on to say, I'm not in the censorship business. I don't like that language. I wouldn't use that language, but I wouldn't establish language standards for my colleagues. That's what Pelosi said. So that's what's kind of they're saying. But I guess if we're going to go into the history aspect of it, Daniel, I think you have a little bit more knowledge of this than me. This kind of way we're kind of looking at politics, would you say this is kind of back in like the early stages of American politics? This type of way of doing, I guess, political work, would you say? Like early 19th century? Maybe up to even more than that?
Are you talking about the language specifically, or
I guess the way in which politics has just kind of been like this dividing line? I think the language as well I think that's the more surface element of that. Would you say we're going more back into like the Stone Age of, I guess, politics in a sense? American politics?
No, it hasn't moved. It's been pretty consistent. Thomas Jefferson, while John Adams, vice president, was writing to newspapers calling him a person with hermaphroditic characteristics. LBJ would have staff meetings in the restroom and would talk about the size of his penis. Like, this is not new. None of this is new. It's been around forever. The dividing lines have always been there. It's consistent amongst politics, and basically everywhere there's two parties. Mm-hmm. Exception being South Africa, where there's historical differences. Very clear historical differences.
I got you. But that's kind of my turn. Ben, do you have anything else to add on the subject?
No, not really.
Okay. So I think we're ready to move on to the next one. And Ben, we're gonna touch on the one you wanted to do, but I really think this is something that happened earlier. Let's pull it up. This is, I guess what happened is a Chinese scientist tried to make gene-edited babies. Ben, lighten us on what's going on here.
So when CRISPR was kind of first discovered, there was like a moratorium on human gene editing that was held by the person who kind of discovered the use of CRISPR, the editing technology that's kind of really hot right now. And in that conference, or whatever they called it, they decided that we should hold off on human gene editing until we know a lot more about all of it, about how the editing technology works, about the actual genes, about just everything. And this scientist ignored that. Coincidentally, right around the time when we were doing the second conference of this, and he I can't remember all the details because details kind of came to light at different times. Like the article you sent me was when it was first discovered.
Yeah.
If I recall correctly, he edited embryos of a number of different couples using IVF, which is just where you like implant the sperm and the egg together and then put it into the mom. And he edited the embryos for, I'm not sure if they're all edited for the same thing, but the babies that were born most recently ended up being a set of twins, fraternal twins. So they're implanted at the same time. They were different. And they were edited to have immunity to HIV by getting rid of the protein that HIV sticks to on your cell. So if you don't have that protein, it can't stick to it, and it just kind of, you don't really get infected.
Yeah.
There was variable success.
HIV.
Sorry? Say what?
Would you still be a carrier of HIV, or would it just pass through you and be gone?
It would pass through you and be gone.
Gotcha.
Yeah, because it can't stick to your cells. So if you were to somehow get it in your bloodstream, it would just float around until it eventually left your body. Because it could never multiply.
Because it can't kill the cells. Gotcha.
Yeah, I'd say, I guess if you injected HIV into the person's bloodstream, they'd be a carrier of it for a while, but I don't know how that would work.
Okay.
Yeah. He had variable success. On one of the babies, he only managed to, you know how all humans have 2 chromosomes? Mm-hmm. Yeah. He only managed to edit one of them. Mm-hmm. So that person still creates that protein that the virus can stick to, just less of it. So they would be kind of slightly resistant to it, maybe like a lot resistant. We're not really sure. And then for the other child, they're mosaic, meaning that some of their cells are immune, but not all of them. Mm-hmm. So that means if your immune system cells are immune to HIV, then the person's immune. If those cells aren't immune, then it's completely useless. It doesn't matter. And then the most recent update on that is he disappeared after a while. Like, people couldn't find him. He announced that he did this study without consulting anyone, because the babies had just been born. And then he went to that conference, and everyone told him he was an idiot, or that they were very upset about it, at least. And then he disappeared. And then most recently they found him. He's being guarded at a hotel in China.
Oh my god!
Just there's like video footage that someone just found him. It was like, oh, there he is, up on that balcony.
Brilliant.
And they tried to contact the university that he was working at, and they just said, oh, only the state government's media is correct, but the state government media hasn't said anything. So
I guess it's the question that I have, and I think when I was looking at this story, people were saying, like, what are the negative ramifications of this? And the one that was so interesting to me was this idea of, like, how far are we close to getting to, like, a superhuman, where we're, like, that gene editing to, like, we're making, like, a super being, in a sense, who's, like, super strong and, like, cannot take any diseases. What would you say to that?
Yeah, people ask that a lot. The craziest thing that I've seen is someone said, could you make someone who is indestructible? Like Superman's skin, like you shoot him with a bullet and nothing happens? It's not physically possible. It defies the laws of physics to be able to do that. The best that we could do is, like you said, we could try to cure all genetic diseases so that someone is born without any diseases at all. So if schizophrenia runs in your family, of course that's a really complex disorder, but let's say schizophrenia runs in your family and you know the causative genes, you could eliminate those so the person would be born without that. Basically, what you could do with the genetic editing is maximize someone's chances. As of now, you couldn't really create a super person because there is no super person. So, like, what genes would you target if they don't exist? The best that you could do is just maximize a person's ability. You could eliminate all diseases. You could make their mitochondria function like an athlete's, who, instead of having random chance, you're just giving them the best chance, kind of.
Okay. That's cool. And Danny, do you have any other questions? Anything else you're interested from this?
A question. Did the parents know? Yes.
So the parents signed on for this. The person went to some organization, I don't remember if it was a clinic, where patients are infected with HIV. So that's where he went to recruit parents with the pitch that he would give their children immunity to HIV, because it's possible for HIV to be passed from mother to child. So the pitch was, your children won't get HIV no matter what. But we already have medicine for that, so there's also a lot of questions about how much, if he did consent properly, if he actually explained the process and what the true benefits were, instead of this sort of, like, trying to sell them on it. But they were aware that they, because they gave their eggs and their sperm to do IVF, and they had multiple embryos implanted. So they were fully aware that the embryos were edited. They just maybe didn't actually understand the science behind it. We're not sure how well he explained it.
And then before we move on, I think we're hitting this right on the head. But interesting enough, Stepahn Hawking, before he died, he said he feared the race of superhumans able to manipulate their own DNA. And I think he feared the most was the fact that he predicted that people this century would gain the capacity to edit human traits such as intelligence and aggression, and he worried that the capacity for genetic engineering would be concentrated in the hands of the wealthy. Do you think that's something that should be feared in that idea?
Well, as with all technologies, it always starts with the wealthy. The first home computers cost $80,000 in the 50s. The thing is with technologies is if you try to restrict them, then they're going to be developed in secret and then only sold to the really rich people who can get back channels to them because they're illegal, so they're really expensive. If you try to make all of this research publicly funded and out there, then it develops more smoothly and it gets to the masses over time. All technologies start in kind of a phase where I have this thing and there's only one of it. I'm going to sell it for $100 million. Okay, now with that $100 million, I'm going to make 10 of it. Now it only costs $1 million each. and then eventually you get mass production and everything becomes really cheap. And that's always going to be the steps that get there. Now, depending on how much funding there is, those steps will be a lot faster. So if you're able to get it from 2 people can buy it to it's basically open to everyone in the public in a span of 10 years, then the first genetically engineered children who are like extremely genetically engineered, assuming we just jump on that right away, they'd only be 10 years old when the masses start being able to use it. If you try to slow the pace of it, that just means that the rich are going to have it first, and they'll only have it for a lot longer.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. I can see that. Daniel, your thoughts on that?
I don't know enough about it to really comment too heavily on it.
I guess this idea of, these types of dangerous technologies, because almost any technology can be turned, I guess, for evil use. Do you think this idea of legalizing those types of projects would make things a lot more publicly safer to not allow for these things to be, I guess, these devilish things that Professor Hawkins talks about?
It would make the experimentation inherently safer. I don't think it would make the consequences of the experimentation any safer.
Okay.
The consequences would still be real, regardless of whether they were brought about in humane ways or not. What the consequences are, I can't say, but reading sci-fi, I don't really like them.
It's almost like the AI thing, right? Like how, if you look at AI, just going off a tangent for a little bit, like the AIs, if you look at the AIs on YouTube, like they're getting kind of creepy though, like for real.
Oh, super creepy. Sophia, I believe is her name, the AI in Saudi Arabia, who, quote, wants to put people in a people's zoo. Like, no, I'm good.
Okay.
Bruh, no. I can kind of see that. Those are some good points. But so I guess to kind of end it off, Ben, should people be worried or just like, oh, that's interesting? What do you say to that?
I think both extremes are really bad. I think banning it outright is a terrible idea because this guy did all this research in secret. Nobody knew about it. If you ban it, it'll all be secret, and all of the procedures will be terrible because you can't do things really well while hiding. But if you just go all laissez-faire about it and, okay, let's just start editing everything, we don't know anywhere near enough about any given gene to just start changing it.
So if we were to make it secret, I mean, if we were to make it public, right? Could somebody still do it secretly and still try to go outside the bounds of what is considered safe by public standards in that sense?
Absolutely, but if you ban it, then that's the only option. Because a lot of people want to do this research. So if you make it so that it's open, but you have to report everything, then you can hold everyone accountable who does this research, because there's avenues to do it legally. But if you ban it outright, then the only way to do it is illegally, meaning, it's kind of like if you wanted to do this research, like you just really want to, and it's legal, and you go, okay, I really want to do it. Oh man, it takes a long time. That's okay. I'll spend my life doing it because that's what I want to do with my life. If it's illegal, you go, oh, it's illegal, but I still want to spend my life doing it, so I can just go at whatever pace I want to.
So in that sense, it's almost like it doesn't matter like if it's legal. I mean, if it's that idea like if we keep it all public, right? If someone wants to do it illegally, they're gonna that's an if, right? But if it's illegal, then someone's definitely gonna try to do that in secret. Is that is that the kind of argument you're kind of bringing out in a sense?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. I like it. I approve. I guess we can move on to the next one. I think we need a laugh. So this one came up. This came out in 2018, and when I saw it, I thought it was absolutely brilliant. So what happened was that there was a person by the name of trying to remember the person's name. His name was he was running for the Mississippian Public Senate. Senate. He was a Republican. His name was Chris McDonald. I think right now he's the current state senator in Mississippi right now. But the one thing he did, the one thing he said that history professor actually approached him on Twitter was, well, he said, well, we'll start with the beginning. Why he's already kind of a terrible person. His name is his name is Senator Chris McDaniel. He is an attorney, a talk show host, and a state senator with a longtime support from the Tea Party, and has a history of toxic racial views. He has consorted with neo-Confederists, and in the previous run for Senate in 2014, he accused Coheran, who's running for his seat in that year of 2018, that he believed that his opponent had won because of voter fraud because black people voted for him in the primary, as if they were synonymous. This article says by Alternet by Matthew Chapman. On Wednesday this must have been in August, I believe, McDaniel took things further by posting a glowy defense of Confederate Commander Robert E. Lee. Robert E. Lee, one of the major Confederate generals in the Confederate Army. Here's the irony, he wrote. Robert E. Lee was the most decorated soldier in the U.S. Army. He was a man of unimpeachable integrity. Lincoln offered him command in the Union Army, but Lee refused, only because his loyalties was to Virginia. Lee opposed both secession and slavery, and yet to the historically illiterate left, I guess he's talking about us, a man who opposed both slavery and secession has come to symbolize both slavery and secession. Okay, and so there's a lot of things wrong with it. We can say it, but I think it's better if we hear what Kevin Gannon, who is a history professor at Grandview University in Des Moines, Iowa, this is what he said on Twitter, and it is absolutely brilliant. His first tweet, he says, "Hi there, Civil War historian here. So this is really, really far from the truth. Got a minute? Well, more than a minute. Here he goes. He totally tears them apart. Okay, this is absolutely brilliant. Lee certainly did not believe in slavery. Lee certainly did not believe slavery was wrong. In an 1856 letter to his wife, he said, 'The blacks are immeasurably better off here than in Africa, morally, socially, and physically. The painful discipline they are undergoing is necessary for their instruction as a race.'" Okay, we already start to see problems already. If you read Elizabeth Pryor's Brown's biography of Lee, you'd learn that Lee broke up every family on his plantation by 1860 by either renting or selling them apart. He once ordered an enslaved man whipped, and then had brine poured over his back. That brine is like lemon or something like that. I don't know. That's more of a question for you guys.
I think brine is seawater, isn't it?
That sounds right, but I'm uncertain.
It's water with a lot of salt in it, not necessarily from the sea.
Jesus. No Christian gentleman here. Gannon then proceeded to debunk McDaniel's assertion that Lee opposed secession. His six. This is number 6 on this list of his rants. Bear in mind that Lee forsook the oath he took to the Constitution and the Union when he left the U.S. Army, where he was a career officer to join the Confederacy. One does not oppose secession and then take such a dramatic action to fight for secession. Basically what he's saying, you guys get that, right? Basically what he's saying is that you don't support secession. You do not support secession, and then fights very hard to say you don't support it. Hope I got that right. Then Gannon proceeded to debunk one of the primary lost cause myths, that Lee's cause and the cause of the Civil War generally was not slavery. Number 8. Don't take my word for it. Read Virginia's secession ordinance, condemning the federal government's actions taken, not only the injury of the people of Virginia, but to the oppression of the southern slaveholding states. Number 10. There's 14. You guys want to go in number 10? Do you guys have it in front of you?
Yeah.
Okay. Ben, go.
Okay. I'm not going to relegate secession because it's crystal clear from the documents and other evidence from the period that secession and the preservation of slavery were inextricably linked in the eyes of Confederates, whether or not they owned slaves themselves. To deny that someone like Bob Ed Lee supported slavery or secession is to buy into the post-Civil War propaganda where eminent white Southerners like Lee sought to soft pedal their power and wartime stances to make themselves more palatable for re-entry into civil society. The local chapter of the Freedmen's Bureau repeatedly charged Washington college students with abducting and raping black girls. Lee, the president of the college, never responded to any of the charges or cooperated with the Bureau to investigate.
And then Daniel, can you cover the last ones?
Sure. What Senator McDaniel is doing is giving you the sanitized version of Lee the Marble Man myth. It's an image that has no basis in fact and is easily disproven by the historical record. I mean, this stuff isn't secret. But to do so, to deny Lee was a supporter of slavery and secession, is to deny that the Civil War occurred because the substantial white regional minority refused to abide by the results of a legal election because they saw it as a threat to their right to own other people. So, Senator McDaniel, who you have a curious way of defining quote-unquote the truth, but I suspect you're more interested in dog-whistling the anti-black racists than you are in historical accuracy, because your assessment of Lee flies in the face of all available historical evidence.
Boom. Big boom right there. Oh, I love that. Thoughts? What you guys got?
Very succinct. Very well said.
Daniel, what are your thoughts, man?
Yeah, he said it all. I just recently did a paper on the Confederate monuments, and he covered a lot of the stuff that a lot of the evidence that Lee was definitely a racist person, definitely owned slaves, definitely all of the above.
And I think the one thing besides just the way in which he brought down this argument, I think also the way in which kind of historians kind of think and how we look at these things. We don't just say things because they feel good or what we like to say. We look at like these different forms of evidence. So what type of evidence does he bring in? He brings in a letter from his wife to know that, yeah, definitely that she was a racist. The actions that he took during his time as a college president in Virginia, I believe. What else did he do? He looked at basically the idea of what the South or the Confederates, kind of what they believed in. Basically, like, if he didn't believe in those ideals, like, it would be wrong for him to even be there. Like, it just seems really dumb. Like, why would you fight so hard to fight for those ideas if you didn't believe in them? And I think it just gives an idea of, like, when we look at history, it's not just like, oh, I just think it's like this. This is what we look at. This is kind of the evidence we use. You can kind of argue against it here in a little bit. But to be fair, this is it. Any thoughts on that, Daniel? What I've just said? Daniel? Oh no, we lost Daniel. Where'd he go?
Am I not here?
Oh,
am I here?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Did you hear my question?
Awesome. I said I basically agree with your previous statement that it's none of this is for making us feel good. It's what happened, and there's nothing more really to it other than trying to find the evidence of what actually occurred at these events. And
yeah, and then also I'd like to say
that.
Oh, sorry, you can go on.
Oh no, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say also just kind of funny thing. I was reading book reviews on Amazon as you do late at night, and it was funny. There's this one book that I used for my research. It was called it was a book called Napoleon. It was I have to put it up. But it was basically about Napoleon, and what this book did. It was like it brought this idea that Napoleon was this great commander. Oh, it's called Blundering to Glory by Owen Connolly. Basically, the book is about bringing this idea that Napoleon was this brilliant general who always had brilliant plans and everything, and he was just like this untouchable person. But what he really does is that he kind of brings this idea that Napoleon got lucky into a lot of his battles, and that it's basically he won a lot of his battles by luck. And there might be like some things why his luck was allowed for him to win more battles. But it was funny. I was reading a little review on Amazon, and the one book it said like, I think what he is saying is correct, but I'm gonna rate it low because it doesn't feel right. Oh my god, that made me laugh. So yeah, history and the things we do in university, we don't do things because they feel good. It's because we have evidence that supports what we're saying, and that's what it is. And I think that's for all sciences, including yours, right, Ben?
Mm-hmm.
You look at the evidence, and
I'd hope.
I mean, yeah.
Oh.
And so my thing is like, if just for future references, if you guys are gonna comment on my things, please like give some evidence of why you're saying it. Like I will not like I don't agree with this guy because he's wrong or something like that. If you please do not do that. Please tell me why you don't believe it and tell me where you got the source so I can look at it. Okay, we're gonna be very intelligent on the channel over here on the YouTube channel. So we'll make you guys smarter people, make you guys better debaters, and the whole world be a lot more green and beautiful.
We'll be very stable geniuses.
And okay, so let's move. We're gonna do 2 more, or about 3 more. We're getting through these pretty quick. Daniel, since you enjoy and history from antiquity, I think we should cover the Mount Vesuvius eruption that happened. You know which one we're talking about?
Yeah, let me find that. It's Mount Vesuvius is murdered its victims more brutal than we thought.
Yeah.
Well, this was pretty interesting. So the volcanic ash didn't just smother them and choke them to death like we thought in their sleep. No, it was more pelting them, whether bludgeoning them with. Sorry, my mic came off for a moment. More like bludgeoning them with the hot ash, than actually than the soft, quiet death that we thought they had.
Yeah. And then how they kind of come up with this idea that they how do they discover that, I guess, in a sense?
I'm not entirely certain. I didn't actually get to finish the article, which is really disappointing. Skim it real quick. Find it again.
We're professionals here.
Professionals get to skim the article as you're talking about it. They found skeletal remains, by the looks of it, of people who appeared to be trying to dodge, like in some kind of dodging motion, is what it appears to be here, which debunks the previous notions that they had all been like peacefully dying.
That they're actually trying.
And then they
go.
Go ahead.
Go. I'm sorry.
It leads them to think that they were being pelted with something and they were trying to avoid it. And, as the no, go ahead.
No, go.
It just. I would try to dodge, 400 to 900 degree balls of molten ash,
And then they're also saying that they're also running away from like lots of just the lava itself, right? Yeah, it says, but it's not just the pyroclastic surge itself that did the Vesuvians in. The high temperatures caused their blood to boil, as well. Yeah, I don't know what pyroclastic wave surge is. That just like lava coming at you?
Not certain. Maybe.
This is which radiated temperatures between 400 and 900 degrees Fahrenheit and swept through the scene at nearly 180 miles per hour.
It's hot gas and volcanic matter.
Okay. Yeah. Very specific. And it said what's this called? Spectroscopic analysis. Ben, you know what that is?
Spectroscopic analysis?
I don't know. It's some fancy thing. What was it?
Spectro is light.
Well, spectroscopy is usually used to identify, like, mass.
So I guess they used this analysis, revealed that they were actually high concentrations of iron. The steam coming off this reaction was enough to put undue pressure on soft tissue and bone, and even cause enough force to burst skulls open. The photos of those remains depict fractures in skulls where pieces just exploded off the surface, consistent with such an injury. The good note is that it looks gruesome, but at least we know the victim's death were quick. The positions of the remains suggest there was a relatively short window of time where anyone suffered or had enough time to react with self-protective action. So yeah, I guess the reason why this thing is interesting, or why they believe this thing should be shared to people, I guess it just shares the dangerous the dangerous results it has with a volcanic eruption. That is not just gas that's going to kill you. That's just literally flying debris that's going to get you. That you should get out of the area as soon as you know it's going to happen. And especially within Naples, of how it hasn't erupted for 73 years, but it's still active, which means it can happen again. Something even comparable to an 8079 eruption. So if anybody's listening near a volcano, just know that it might come at you with flying debris of death, and make sure you get out of the area as soon as possible. So that's your PSA for today. Poser's announcement.
Avoid fast hot gas. Very helpful.
Okay. Now this one is super interesting. We're going back to another history one. Actually, no, Ben, we should cover the one you sent us.
About the Davis one.
The Davis one. So actually, we'll go with that one, then we'll go with our last one, and we'll end off the podcast. So it turns out that Davis actually is good at doing things.
Hey, Davis is a good university. They've done a lot.
It's okay. I like them. They did wondrous things for me. So Ben, the science expert on the panel, give us the lowdown. I have an idea, but what's going on with this?
Okay, well, basically they took a bunch of dogs, the breeds that have kind of wide, flat faces and a curly tail.
It's called the Bulldog, right?
Well, there's a couple of different breeds they were looking at. There are actually a few terriers that they were looking at as well.
They said French Bulldog. Oh, wait. Bulldogs, French Bulldogs, and Boston Terriers, I guess, is what they were looking at. But go on.
Okay. And they're trying to figure out what causes them to have that unique morphology, the face shape and the weird tail. And they discovered a gene that all of them shared, almost all of them, 100% of the Bulldogs and the, what were the other ones? The French Bulldogs, the Boston Bulldogs, and 92% of the Boston Terriers all had the same exact gene mutation. And interestingly, it's a gene mutation that's responsible for, I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce it, I think it's Robinow syndrome in humans. So they discovered that that the gene that causes the shape of these dogs is the same gene that causes severe disorder in humans. And the disorder is marked by a flat, wide face and spine problems, which is where you get the curly tail. And it was just really interesting, that kind of connection.
And they also they also find these different, what I know is that they also find these interesting little things from animals to discover how to defeat those types of those syndromes, things like that. I remember there was a frog or something like that, like a frog from South America, and supposedly it was a way, if you take some cells from the frog, you can actually cure cancer cells. I don't know if you heard that one.
I haven't heard about that. I just found what you were talking about though. 2011 sounds like it wasn't very effective. Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of creatures just that already have things that can fight diseases that we have.
I think it was actually no. I think it was a spider or like venom or something like that. Where if you actually use it for humans, instead of killing people, actually But yeah, I can go on. I get what you're saying though. They use.
I found a frog example. But yeah, so certain creatures just are, they already fight diseases that are either exactly the same or similar to diseases that humans have. And it's really useful as models to try to, we can use them to test out treatments to try to cure humans. Mm-hmm. So for example, with HIV, there are primate versions. There's HIV-2, which is a primate one, and there's, I think it's called simian HIV, so it's called SHIV instead of HIV. Mm-hmm. We can use those as models to try to cure things in humans.
And that's kind of been, if you look at the history of medicine development, would you say that's how we get a lot of the different antibiotics and different things that we use for humans? Would you say that's?
Well, absolutely. Penicillin, we used animal models for that. The top 100 medical discoveries of the past let's say all of the major medical discoveries of the past 100 years are because of animal models.
Mm-hmm.
Without them, if we had jumped because without animal models, you have to jump straight into humans, which is problematic for a number of reasons.
Yeah, and then also it's funny enough, I was watching a documentary on PBS. I forget what it was, but it was looking at like how in South America, I think it was South America. Yeah, I think it was South America. But like if you look at like in South America, like the biodiversity within like the South American jungles, and not only that, but there's also like lots of oil in those types of like jungle canopies and things like that nature. Like like there's this battle between like trying to save the rainforest and also trying to grow like businesses by getting connected to those resources that are occupied in those areas. But what's interesting is that like, and one of the people who are affected by not just animals, but like the native communities that are like there, like the I'm gonna say Native Americans, but yeah, like those types of indigenous communities who are there, like they're the ones who are being most affected by these because like, you know, you're basically trampling over where they live and kind of how they live their life. And so what they did interesting, I don't know what the tribe was called, but instead of like trying to fight these companies, they actually tried to like take on that type of role where what they would do is they would actually like mark up their entire area where their forest is at, and what they would do is actually like take samples and like collect data on the different trees that they have. And so they can actually use that for like profit to like not only help themselves like financially, but to it's like putting a price tag on like on a preserved forest. And I bet you a lot of those things that they're doing will allow those like medicinal companies and different things like that to kind of to grow that.
They've studied it and they've actually found that long term preserving the forest, you can actually make a lot more money off of them. Just it takes more time and more effort.
Yeah.
So the short-term profits usually kind of win out.
Yeah. And Daniel, have anything to add on that?
Two anecdotes. The first anecdote is about the dogs themselves. Adam ruins everything. Once again, I'm going to quote him, and I'll post the link into the description. Yeah, he has why the dogs look like that and how they come to be and how these specific breeds come about. Mostly inbreeding, because gross. And then, to your comment on the frogs, and they're testing like the blood of frogs and whatever for different scientific experiments and whatnot. They did the same thing with Komodo dragons in Indonesia. The Washington Post did a great piece in 2017. I posted that as well, discussing how they believe the blood of the Komodo dragon could potentially lead to great medical breakthroughs in several fields, leading from vaccinations and antibiotics and whatever, because I think there's over 50 different species of bacteria that live inside the Komodo dragon's mouth. That's why it's deadly to be bit by one, not because it has like an actual venom.
Yeah.
Just because its mouth is so gross. Yeah, more than 50 varieties of bacteria, and they almost never get sick, was the weird thing. That's weird. Even with all the buildup in their mouth. And so that's just an example of the studies you were talking about.
Do animals get sick though? I mean,
yes.
I mean they do, but like, do they get like colds and things like that like we do?
Yes, absolutely.
Do.
Yes.
Okay.
It's a lot less common than with humans, but they definitely get sick.
Okay. I mean, I know
they aren't just like putting gross things in their body that they know they can't eat or they know they shouldn't do. They're tired, they'll go to sleep. You know, if it's time to wake up, they'll wake up. They'll go run. They'll do whatever as long and they know when to stop. Usually.
Yeah. I was like, sometimes guys on this podcast I might ask stupid questions. So that was my stupid question on the podcast. Brilliant. Okay, so we're down to the last one, and I think this is one of the most interesting ones for me. So let's open it up really quickly. So people think that when you're doing history that it's all fine and dandy and there's no negative consequences of it. Turns out if you do that in Thailand, you might run into some legal problems. So I can actually read this entire. It's a very short. It's very short. So I'll read it. The entire article. Thailand drops charges against historian who questions the facts around historic 16th century duel. This is by Smart News. I don't know by Bridget Kantz. Sulka. Wait, your wife's from Thailand, right, Ben? How do you say this name?
Yep. Oh God. Sulak Suvareska?
Okay.
Suvaraksa?
Good.
I don't know. It's really hard.
I was going to say, your wife would be very upset if you didn't get that right. He cast doubt on whether the legendary King Nasura had really defeated an adversary while riding an elephant. This is what it goes. In 1593, after a bitter struggle against the supremacy of the Burmese, which in modern geography, it's right next to Thailand, I believe, right, Ben?
Yes.
Okay.
The nation of Burma. Stupid
yes.
question, too.
I'm just kidding for everybody else who may not know geography.
Okay, but where's Myanmar, though?
Bruh. We're not getting into that on the podcast. We're not getting into that. Okay. The Thai king Nurasu defeated a Burmese ruler during a dramatic battle on an elephant back. That, at least, is how historical accounts in Thailand portray the encounter, which has become an important liberation story to the country. That's a very long liberation story. Old liberation story. But when 84-year-old historian and activist cast doubt on the details of King Nurusu's defeat, he found himself facing prosecution in Thailand's military court, a case that was dropped on Wednesday for lack of evidence after a 2-year investigation. As the Associated Press reports, prosecutors decided not to pursue their case against Sulak. I'm going to try it. Sulak Sivaraska? How did I do, Ben?
Sivaraska.
Oh, we'll keep going. It was okay. Who was charged in October under Thailand's controversial lèse majesté law against defaming, insulting, or threatening the royal family. The charges were connected to a 2014 university lecture in which Suluk cautioned his audience not to fall prey to propaganda and questioned whether King Nasura had in fact slain a Burmese crown prince while riding an elephant. He was first and blah blah blah. King Nasura ascended to the throne in 1590 when Thailand, formerly known as Siam, was a vassal state of Myanmar, formerly known as Burma, or whatever political faction part to, I guess. Nasura denounced his allegiance to the Burmese and defeated a succession of armies that tried to invade Siam. The decisive conflict between these countries is said to have occurred in 1593 when Nasura reportedly challenged the Burmese crown prince. I'm not even going to try to say this word. Megillah Siwa to a duel on elephant back and defeated his opponents by stabbing him with a lance. Oh, very heroic. Chris Baker, an historian specializing in Thai history, told ABC News, the Australian version of it, that there were around 10 different accounts of the incident, all of which are different. But the most compelling cited of the battle, Nasura stabbed the Burmese prince during one-to-one combat on an elephant, has become deeply entrenched in Thai culture. The story in particular is important to the military, which celebrated the reported date of the battle with the parade every year. And since Thailand's army seized power in the 2014 coup, the country has been ruled by a military government. If he had been found guilty, he would have faced at least 16 years in prison. He describes himself as a Sulak describes himself as a royalist and credits Thailand's new king Ma Vegahorn.
Just call him Rama the 10th.
Okay, now Rama the 10th for securing his freedom. What else it says? Anything else interesting in that? And it says at least 94 people. I guess he got off because the king.
Yeah.
It says at least 94 people have been prosecuted and 43 have been sentenced for violating this law since the 2014 coup.
Yeah, this happened a lot under the old king, where the government would try to charge people under this law, and the king would go, "It's fine," because the king didn't create the law; it's just a law that exists. Mm-hmm. The old king was a very nice person, though.
I think it comes back to that point, especially this idea that what we say might not feel good, but it's more correct than just believing that it feels good. But I also think it also kind of shows that role of history, that history is not just this thing that people just say. It actually means something to people. It gives people that identity. And that depending on what you want to believe as your identity, it can be very powerful. And it shows by someone almost getting arrested for writing historical... I would say if you're at university, I would say it's pretty factually historically correct. You know what I'm saying? Um,
And he didn't even necessarily say, well, I mean, he didn't even necessarily say, no, it happened this way. He just said, don't think it quite happened that way, especially since that way is 10 different ways.
yeah. Daniel, what's your thoughts on that?
This whole article surprised me. There's a lot of things I did not know that happened. Like, I did not know there was a military coup in 2014 in Thailand.
Yeah, Thailand goes through cycles of military coups and then going back to being usually a parliamentary system. They've gone back and forth a lot of times. During the last king's reign, I think it happened 12 times.
That's impressive. Good. I don't know whether to be proud of that king or like.
The people really liked him. He was the oldest living monarch at the time.
Good for him. All right. I didn't know there was ever a story of two kings fighting on the backs of elephants in Thailand. Like, that sounds awesome.
It is. They portray it in a bunch of shows, and they use real elephants, and it's a lot of fun.
Like, all of this sounds great until he gets arrested. Like,
yes.
I don't know. I think it just shows that, like, history is actually a very powerful thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not just like these guys in a room just writing books and like they have no lives and they never see the light of day and they're just. Am I just staying my life or something like that? I don't know. But no, I think it just shows us how important history is to the world and how people actually care about it, both in negative ways and positive ways, as we saw from this guy's thing. But yeah, I don't know. Except for the fact that he almost got arrested for it, it kind of makes me feel that like what I'm doing and what me and Daniel are doing if he decides to do history, or other people who are doing history for that matter, that we're actually doing something that's actually important, that people actually care about, and that hopefully that when we do this channel, people will kind of see what we're trying to do with it. Any other thoughts on this?
no, I've got none.
Actually, Ben, I want to ask you, when you were in, because I remember when the coup was happening, or at least I saw videos on it, and how it was kind of like a very, I won't say traumatic experience, but it was very like it was a very, very big thing that happened during this country. What from what you've seen, what was kind of like the feeling you got under that new regime? Better, worse? What were people saying, if they could say anything?
Well, it happened about 5 years ago, and I didn't go to Thailand before that, so I'm not sure. I know my wife's opinion on it. There's sort of two sides, two political sides. There's the royalists, and then the people who hate the royal family, I guess. And I don't know. It's kind of interesting. The previous king ruled for ruled for almost exactly 70 years.
God damn.
And like I said, the people really liked him, but he didn't really hold any power necessarily. Like I said, it's kind of similar to the British parliamentary system, but he still had a lot of influence because he could just, the people listened to him a lot. He's kind of credited with being able to hold the country together through all those coups and the restarting of the government again and again and again. The last time the coup happened was because years ago there was someone who was the head of the parliament, the prime minister, and she started doing really corrupt things. So she was like banished from the country, kind of just kicked out.
Damn.
My understanding is she was kicked out like democratically, like through the parliamentary actual rules. And then years after that, her brother became the prime minister, and like was trying to get her back into the country. And people freaked out, and then the coup happened. My wife's family is very much on the royalist side, where they really care about the king, and they really hated those people. So for them, they're like, yeah, it sucks that it's military government right now, but that was the best option, kind of a thing.
Okay. But when you were there, did you feel like it was like a police state in a sense, or was it still kind of open and people were doing their thing?
No, I mean, so Bangkok's the most visited city in the world. They're not doing anything to stop the tourism. They get a lot of money from the tourism.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah, I never, like, when I went to France, for example, years and years ago, I remember when I first walked in the airport, I saw people with, like, large rifles and was like, oh my god, there's, like, military in the airport.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember seeing any police while I was there. I'm sure they were around.
Oh, I guess what I was
They
trying
never
to
stood
say.
out.
I guess I was trying to say, like, this, like, you know, like when we say a police state, it's like, censored information. You can't really say what you want to say, or else you get arrested. That type of thing. Did that kind of feel like that, or not really? Or did people really say that?
When we were there, one of the things we were told as like introduction by our professor, because I started off there doing study abroad, was like, don't say anything bad about the king. It's illegal. So it's definitely illegal, and the majority of the country likes the royal family. So if you were to like casually be in the middle of a crowd and start saying really bad stuff about the king, probably want to fear for your safety.
I guess like the current government, not just the king, the current government. I guess same thing.
Yeah, I mean it's since it's a military state, my understanding is the police are fairly corrupt, but I never personally had anything happen, nor did anything happen to our group of 50 students. Mm-hmm. I never heard anyone else talking about anything having had happened.
Okay. So it's all
So I hear stories about there being corruption, but I can't actually remember any specific event happening.
Okay. But no, I really like that because like I just said, I find it a very interesting thing. Well, I think we've covered all the articles, and we're probably going to end this podcast now. I think we went for like an hour or so. Anything you guys want to say? Anything like that? Last words? Daniel, how about you, my man? You good?
Nah, the awkward silence says it all.
Should we just end the podcast like this with awkward silence? Just like cut the end.
Agreed.
No. So that's the end of the podcast, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully it'll come out soon. And again, I'll be a lot more active on the interwebs. And if you guys want another podcast like this, definitely hit it in the like. Ooh, what's that? Is that a cat?
It's a chinchilla.
What's his name?
Dashy.
Sorry, Dan, you can't see this, but it's very cute.
I didn't want to see anyway.
You'll have to watch the video.
You have to watch the video, guys. And before we leave, what's your chickilla's name?
Dashy. I just call him Critter. He doesn't actually know his real name. If I say Critter, he usually pays attention.
Okay.
He thinks I'm about to let him out, though.
We'll put this scene on the thumbnail so everyone can know it's a cat. Oh, look at that. Got a cute face. So yeah, definitely. We'll end the podcast here. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you guys like it, subscribe, do all those things, share with your friends, mom, dad, dog, your chinchilla.
Oh God, he's on the computer.
Whatever you guys want to do. So, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you later.
When you loving on me.
Bye.
I don't wanna die for them to miss me. Yes, I see the things that they wishing on me.